Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Session 8 of SMI Academy, where we will be discussing the combining of multiple data sources. So for those of you who have a need to combine data from different sources, such as Service Manager and Asset Manager, or any two or more data sources, this is the session for you. Data sources, just to be clear, since I know the majority of our customers are using the solution for HP Service Manager, what constitutes a single data source is basically one universe. So any report that requires more than one universe, even if it's two or more universes from one application like Service Manager, that is covered by this. So when we say multiple data sources, we basically mean multiple universes, regardless of what the source application behind that universe is. It could be two universes from the same application or two universes from two different applications. Either way, the principles that we're going to discuss in this session are the same. So there we go. Okay, so the mechanism that we use in the Web Intelligence client in Business Objects is called merging dimensions. You may or may not be aware that when you're working with a universe in Business Objects, the majority of those objects are called dimensions, and those would be the ones with the little blue icon next to the name of the object. The others that you see in our universes are called measures, and they have the little orange icon. So a dimension is basically a piece of data or the result of a calculation based on data in the source database. A measure is an aggregate function. So measures are things like counts, sums, averages, percentages, things like that, where it's the object returns the result of an aggregate function and not just a piece of data, just a value. So you can't merge measures, but you don't really have to merge measures, but you can merge dimensions. And merging dimensions, so basically taking two dimensions from two different queries in Web Intelligence and bringing them together in the report and saying these two are now merged together into one, is how we handle bringing together the data from multiple sources in one report. So merging dimensions can accomplish two things. The first is that we can merge objects from multiple sources into a single record. This is probably what most users want to do when they want to merge data from multiple sources. So what this means is that, and if I can bring up my pen here. So what this means is that in this diagram here, we've got an example where we can look at this as three different sources. So we've got the orange source, and then the green source, and then the blue source. And what we're doing is, if we look at this as our data set, now this doesn't mean that the report has to display this data as a table. It could be in a chart, but for the purposes here, I want to show you how the data is getting combined in the data set that's behind the report. So if we had three queries, the orange query, the green query, and the blue query, and we used merge dimensions in this fashion, we're basically creating a single record that contains data from each of the three sources. So as it says here, the ratio between the sources can be either 1-to-1, 1-to-many, or many-to-many. So what that means is that it is possible to have more than one record in the green source that relates to the orange source, or in the blue source that relates to the green source. you can have multiple records from one source relate to a single record in the other, or it can be one-to-one, either way. A requirement here is that each source must have one value in common with at least one other source. So what this means is that in order to combine data in this way, there must be a common denominator between the two sources, or one of the sources with at least one of the other sources. So a good example would be if you're using Service Manager and you want to combine incident data, or I should say interaction data, with the data from the related incidents. So you would need two queries, one on the incident universe, one on the interaction universe, and one of those two queries would have to contain the ID of the related record from the other query. So for instance, the interaction query would have to contain the related incident's ID so that we can relate it to the incident data. There has to be a common denominator between the two sources. And again, I'm using Service Manager as an example, but it could be any two sources. You know, it doesn't have to be two universes from Service Manager. It could be a Service Manager universe and you know, a time management universe from some other source, or you know, an asset manager universe, or whatever, or you know, some sort of maybe a personnel data source that you want to bring in related data from. As long as there is a common denominator between the two sources, you can combine the data in the report in this fashion. So as I said, this is one of the two ways that merge dimensions can bring together data. And this is probably the most common. This is what most people want to do. The other is a little different. We can combine data. Sorry, I have to give control back to... There we go. We can also merge records from multiple sources into one data set. Now, if you look at the way I've arranged the colors here, we're no longer trying to combine them into, you know, combine objects or fields from multiple sources into a single record. Rather, we want to take the results of several queries and just combine them into one list of records. So this would commonly be referred to in SQL terms as a union, where you've got two queries. The data, as you can see here in the second bullet point, you don't need to have a common value between the two sources in this case. There doesn't need to be a common denominator or a common value between two sources, because we're not really relating the data from one source to the other. We're simply taking the results of these multiple data sets and concatenating them into one data set. So in this case, the important requirement here is that each column in the source must contain the same type of data. So what that means is that if you want to combine two data sets in this way, each set must have the same number of fields or columns. So here we see that they all have six columns. And each column must have the same type of data between the two or more sets. So in this case, the first field in the orange and in the green and in the blue must be the same. So for instance, they all have to be text. Maybe the second column in each one is a date, and the third column in each one is a number. That is a requirement. So if the second column in orange was a number and the second column in green was a date, this won't work. You have to make sure that the data types line up between the sources, but you don't have to have this common denominator, common value between the data sources, because you're not really relating the data. You're just saying first put all of the orange records and then follow on that with all the green records and then follow on that with all the blue records. And I'm going to show you in Web Intelligence examples of each of these. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to Web Intelligence. Okay, let me open up one of my examples. So I'm going to open this in modify mode, so I want to actually make changes to it. All the concepts that we're talking about in this session exist in both Business Objects 4, which is what I'm using here, and in Business Objects 3, which I know a lot of Westbury users, a lot of SMI users are still on Business Objects 3. The concepts are the same in both. The execution may be slightly different. So like when we get to the point where I show you how to merge dimensions, the interface that you'll see in 4 is slightly different than it is in 3, but the concepts are the same. So you'll just go to, the icon will be in a different place on your screen to merge dimensions in 3 than it will be here in 4. So I've set up a sample report here, and I've already created 2 queries. And so I've got 2 queries here with data from the incidents and data from the interactions. So each is built on a separate universe. And in fact, let me open up the query editor so you can see what I've done, because this will be important. So here in the query editor, you can see that I've created 2 queries. You may or may not have done this already. If you have, then you'll know that, if you've already got 1 query, you can add a second or a third or a fourth or however many you need by clicking on this Add Query button. And in this case, I have to choose from universe, and then I pick the appropriate universe and build the query. And once you have more than 1 query in a report, it is really recommended, highly recommended, that you start to use meaningful names for your queries. By default, Business Objects or Web Intelligence will just call them Query 1, Query 2, Query 3, etc. But once you have more than 1 query and you're trying to work with the data, it's much easier to do if your query names tell you something about what's in the query itself. So in order to do that, you can right-click on the tab and choose Rename, and then put in a new name for the query. So I have 2 in this one. The first one is on the incident universe. You'll see here it says SMI Incident Management. The second one is on the interaction universe, Service Desk Interactions. And I've pulled in a handful of fields from both. And I have some filters here so I get, a reasonable amount of data for this example. In this case, I've gotten the previous full month's data based on close time. So all the incidents that were closed in January and all the interactions that were closed in January. I shouldn't need to refresh, so I'm just going to click Close, revert changes and close because I didn't make any changes. So now you can see I've got a blank report. I haven't done anything here yet. And on the left I can see my 2 data sources and the fields that I've included from each. Now by default, if you see where I'm clicking down here in the lower left-hand corner, by default, Web Intelligence wants to list it like this. So basically, it shows you one long list of objects, and then you can see the query name is shown in parentheses here. So if we have 2 objects with the same object name, then the query name is shown in parentheses. I find it far easier to switch this from alphabetical order to query, and then have it actually group the queries together, and I can collapse and expand them. I think that it's far easier to work with multiple queries this way than using the alphabetical order. So I've got data from 2 sources. Like I said, 2 universes equals 2 sources, even though they both happen to be Service Manager universes. Now, right now I have no dimensions merged. I can use data from both sources in a single report this way. I don't have to merge dimensions if I don't need to. So say I need a report that shows me a breakdown of incidents and interactions by priority. But I don't need to actually combine the data in any way. I just need to see 2 pie charts, one for incidents, one for interactions. In this case, I don't need to create any merge dimensions. I can simply say, I want to insert a new element here. Let me click down here a little bit. I want to insert a pie chart. Sure, let's insert it right here. let me assign some data to the pie chart. So I'm going to pick first my incident priority. So under incidents, I'm going to choose priority. And then I want to see the number of incidents per priority. So I'll click apply and OK. There's my pie chart for incidents. I should be able to label it as such. So that's the name. Let's see, let's give it a title. Visible, and we'll call it Incidents by Priority. Okay, there we go. Now I also want to see interactions by priority, again in its own pie chart. So I'll right click here, choose Insert, Pie Chart, right here, and now I can assign data to this one, and in this case I want to use interactions, so number of interactions, and then under interactions I want the priority. I'll click OK again. I can give this one a name just the same, so we'll say format chart, go into title, and this one is interactions by priority. So there you go. Data from two sources in one report with no merge dimensions, because I'm not trying to use data from multiple sources in a single report element. Each element, each chart being an element, and tables, individual tables would also be elements. Each chart only contains data from a single source. So since I'm not putting data from multiple sources into one element, I don't need to merge anything in this case. Now let's take it a step further. Let's say I don't want to see it separated like this. I want one table that shows me the total number of interactions and the total number of incidents per priority. One table. So let's start a new report. We'll add a report, a blank one. Now we need to merge dimensions because we want to bring this and this, the number of incidents and the number of interactions, into one table together. And we want to see the number of interactions and incidents by priority. So we need to merge the priority objects from each query. Notice when I click around in this list of objects, certain things gray out. What that is telling me is that right now, the way that everything is configured, I cannot use these grayed out objects in the same report element as the one I have selected. So that's basically telling me that, you know, there's no merge dimensions and I can't relate these grayed out objects to the one that you currently have selected. You know, just an FYI basically is what it's giving us. So in order to bring these together, I need to merge priority. So basically I'm going to take the list of values from each priority and merge it into a single list. So to merge dimensions, in this version of Business Objects, we're going to click on Merge here under Data Access. In Business Objects 3, you'll have a Merge Dimensions icon visible on your toolbar. It's one of the first few. So if you're in 3, you'll just look for your Merge Dimension object in this area. I'm going to click on Merge. Now it's telling me I have to select 2 or more qualified dimensions to be merged. Like I said, we want to merge priority, so I'm going to click on priority here. And since I'm selecting multiple values, I need to hold Control on my keyboard and select the second priority from interactions and click OK. And now I have a merge dimension on priority. And you can see this is the merged version of the dimension, and then you can see the individual dimensions that make up the merged dimension below it. I should note that when you're building a report or when you're putting together a table or a chart, selecting one of these and selecting this is not the same thing. So whenever you want to bring in data from more than one source, you always want to make sure that you're using the merged dimension and not one of the individual components of it. So again, I want a table that shows me my priority. number of incidents, and interactions per priority. So very easy. I'm going to drag in the priority merge dimension to start my table, and now I want number of incidents and number of interactions. So very simple example of how I can get the data from two sources into a single table. I could even turn this into a bar chart. So let's do a copy of it, and then I'll paste the copy down here, and now this one I can change, turn it into a column chart, and there you go. Now we can see the data graphically as well, and you can see what it's done is it's created two sets of bars, a blue set for the incidents and a green set for the interactions. So same data, just displayed graphically. And again, all because we merged the priority values together. That's what's making this work. Let me save this just in case we have to come back to it. Okay, so up to this point, we've only brought in measures from the different sources. So in other words, priority was our merge dimension, and then the only other objects that we brought into the table were measures. And one of the things about the way that measures behave and dimensions behave is that once you merge a dimension or create a merge dimension, all measures from those multiple sources that are part of the merge dimension can be used with the merge dimension. That's not so with other dimensions. So with other dimensions, you can see that, for instance, if I select the open time from incidents, it still doesn't know what to do with open time, interaction, close time, and category from interactions. The only thing that now will work with the incidence data is priority, because priority is part of the merge dimension. The inverse of that is true as well. If I select category here, again, the only object up here that I can use with category is priority because it's part of the merge dimension. I can't do that with anything else because they are not part of the merge dimension. So let's go into our second example. Modify. Now I'm going to show you how to bring in dimensions from more than one query into a single table. So a good example in this case is we want to see in one table all interactions, and we want to see the details of any incident that is related to those interactions. So show me the interactions, and then in that same table, show me the ID, the category, and the priority from any incidents that are related to that interaction. That's something that is going to require a little additional work because we want to create a merge dimension that relates the incidents to the interactions, but then we want to bring in other things like category and priority that aren't necessarily or that aren't going to be part of a merge dimension themselves. Okay? So I've got the same, I'm starting from the same place I started in the last one. I've got my two sources, but I need to make a few changes here. So I'm going to go into here so I can edit my query. There we go. All right, so as I said, I want to see all interactions, and for interactions that have a related incident, I want to see that incident's ID number, priority, and category. So what I'm going to do here is in the interaction query, which is what I'm in now, because I need that common denominator between the two, I'm going to go under Service Event Relations, choose Related Incidents, and bring in the Related Incident ID, because I need some way to identify which incidents are related to which interactions. So this is going to allow me to do that. I now have a common denominator between the two. In incidents, I'm not going to change anything up here, but I want to make sure that I'm only getting those incidents that are related to interactions in this query. So I'm going to make a few changes here as well. The first thing I'm going to do is drop the close time, because I don't want to filter on the interactions close time now, or I'm sorry, on the incidents close time. I want to make sure that I'm getting all incidents that are related to interactions which were closed in the last full month. So interaction close time, predefined condition in the last X full months. And I also only want to get those incidents that are related to an interaction. So if it's a standalone incident, I don't want it. I only want those that are related to interactions. So I'm also going to bring in the related interaction ID and add a filter that says that it must not be null. There must be a value in the related interaction ID. Okay? So now with those changes, I'm going to run my query, answer my prompt. In this case, I want to use a 1 for both. Okay, I've got my data. Nothing in the report, of course. First thing I'm going to do is change the arrangement here so it's sorted by query and not just alphabetically. So we want to show, again, interactions and the related incidents. Our common denominator is the incident ID from the incidents and the INC incident ID from interactions. So that's where I'm going to create a merge dimension on those two. So let's merge, choose incident ID and INC incident ID, and click OK. And there we go. Now it's merged on that. So as I said, the first thing I want to see in my table is the interaction data. So let's bring in our interaction ID, our open time, our close time, all of the interaction, the interactions category, and the interactions priority. And I want to see the ID of the incident that's related to the interaction. So I'm going to use the merged dimension and drop that in. So we can see here we have a related interaction or incident, here we have one, here we have one, here we have one. Now, I said that we not only want to see the ID of the related incident, we also want to see the related incident's priority and category. So what happens if I try to bring in category? See the note it's giving me? Cannot drop here. The object is incompatible. So right now I can't bring in the category and the priority from the incident because it's not compatible. It doesn't understand how to relate the data. So I need to tell it that this data is in fact directly related to the incident ID that's part of the merge dimension. So to do that, we use a type of variable that we don't use really in any other instance. So I'm going to start the variable editor. And if we look at the qualification, we have three types: dimension, measure, which we've probably used quite a bit, and then the third, detail, which you may have always wondered, what is that for? You know, I never use it. I don't know when I would want to use it. Well, now you do. This is when detail is relevant. So a detail is basically additional information that is directly related to a specific dimension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the category and the priority details of the incident ID. So I'm going to make this a detail of the incident ID and this a detail of the incident ID. Once they are details of it, and it's obviously a part of our merge dimension, then they can be used in the table with the interaction data. So first I say I want it to be a detail. Now I give it a name. I'll call it INC category. Now we've got a new field here. What's the associated dimension? What dimension is this a detail of? Well, remember I said it has to be a detail of the dimension that's part of the merged dimension. So in this case, it has to be a detail of the incident ID from incidents. So under incidents, I select incident ID. Okay, so now we see that's the associated dimension. The formula is easy because I'm not going to do anything to the value. I just want the category value as is. So I'm just going to double click on category under incidents. And that's it. Just pass the value of category. I don't have to do any calculating. So I click OK. Now you can see I've got this incident category variable, and this, it will let me add to the table. So now I can do the same thing with the priority. So INC priority. Again, it's going to be a detail of the incident ID from incidents. And this time we want the priority. Now click OK. And bring in priority. And there you have it. So now I can see the category and the priority for the incident, even though they're not part of the merged dimension. I could do the same for the close time and open time, but in the interest of time and the fact that it's just this, I'm just repeating the same steps over and over, I'm not going to do that, but you could. I don't want you to think that I'm not doing it because it's not possible. I'm not doing it because I'm just showing you the same thing over and over and over again. A common mistake that I want to point out that happens here is that when you're creating the detail, so for instance, let's say we're creating the detail for priority, and I've done this myself plenty of times, is that when you're choosing the associated dimension, instead of choosing the incident ID, you'll choose the value that you want. So in this case, priority. So let's say I did that. I made the associated dimension priority. You'll get an error that looks like that. So if you get an error that looks like that, you can immediately check that the associated dimensions of your detail variables is what it should be. Because 99% of the time when you see this error, it's because one of the associated dimensions is wrong. So I'm going to switch it back to what it should be. And click OK. Yes, I want to modify it. There we go. And then it works again. Okay. So far we've seen this 2 times. We've seen it using just using measures from each data source, and we've seen it using specific values or dimensions from each data source, bringing them through as detail variables, which is what we just finished. What we're going to see now is the second option. So instead of showing incidents and interactions and showing the relationship to one another, so saying here's the interactions and here's the incidents that are related to those individual interactions, now another way I could bring the data together is just say I just want to take all the incidents and all the interactions and put them into one big list. So I don't care, I don't need to see how these items are related to one another. I just want to see one list that contains all interactions and all incidents. Okay. Again, switching this to query view. So now what I want is one table, and in the first column I want to see the incident ID or the interaction ID. In the second column I want to see the open time for the appropriate record. In the third column I want to see the close time for the appropriate record. In the fourth, the category, and in the fifth, the priority. So I can do this as well, and in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to merge all of the like dimensions. So we're going to create a merge dimension for each of the 5 dimensions that we have in each query. So data access, merge. So first I'll merge incident ID and interaction ID. And of course, they're not going to be equal. But what it's going to do is it's going to create one list that contains all the values from each. So merge dimensions can kind of do can do different things depending on what's in the dimensions that you're merging. So for instance, in the last exercise, we merged the related incident ID from interactions and the incident ID from incidents. Of course, we expect there to be similar values in those two result sets. So what happens is the two results sets get joined based on that data. However, we can merge dimensions that don't have any like values, and instead of joining the data, we basically get a concatenation of the two lists. So the values in each object, the list of values in each object, become one big list of values. That's what we're doing here. Now in this case, I don't like this name for the merge dimension because it has the incident ID and the interaction ID. So I'd rather it be something more generic than just incident ID. I can right click and choose edit properties and give it a better name. So in this case, I'm going to call it ID number. Okay, so that's one. Now let's merge category. Let's merge close time. Let's merge open time. And let's merge priority. So now I've created one merge dimension for each of those five, and I can just build my table in the usual fashion using the merge dimension. So ID number followed by open time, followed by close time, followed by category, and finally priority. And you can see here we only see we only see incidents in the list right now. They're all in one list, but just the way that it's sorted, only incidents are showing up first. But to illustrate this better, I'm going to sort it so that the open time, I want to sort it based on the open time column in ascending order. And now you can see the mix between the two. And let me do this as well. Format cells, auto fit. There we go. So now you can see we've got, here's an interaction, here's an incident, here's an interaction, then we've got more incidents, then an interaction, then so on and so forth. So we've basically taken the two data sets and merged them into a single data set without really relating the data from the two data sets. We're just combining the two lists into one big list. And of course, what we had to have in order to do this was like values from each set. So we want to see in this column, we want to see close time, whether it's the incidents or the interactions close time. So that's why we merged the two close time dimensions, and the rest follow the same pattern. And of course, it also was a requirement that the data types were similar. So I can't merge close time with priority because they're different data types, and it doesn't know what to do with that. So merging like data types is also a requirement here. So that is how we can accomplish the third option. One thing I'll point out here is that I've shown you these data sets in tables and not charts because in most cases it's easier to illustrate what's going on in a table than it is a chart. But you could definitely use all of these merge dimensions in charts just as well. As I said, though, it looks better, or it's easier to convey the concept in a table, so that's why I've been using tables. The last thing I will show you is something that, again, you may or may not have used already, but basically it's an extension of this last exercise and it's a way that you can create these unions or these concatenated sets in a single query if each set is based on the same universe. So maybe you need you have two sets of criteria for incidents or interactions or something, and you can't do it in a single query, so you need to do it in two queries, but it would be two queries on the same universe with the same output. So effectively, you don't need to do that with two queries, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's go into Edit. Let me get rid of that data preview. Let me create a new query. So I'm going to say Add Query from Universe. And let's use the interaction universe, service desk interaction, select. Okay. So let's say I need to see from my interactions, nothing new, interaction ID, priority, and number of interactions. And I need to see it where it was closed last month, so date, close time, and then in my predefined conditions, last X full months. Okay. Right. But what I don't want to see is any interaction that has a related incident. So this query should only return standalone interactions. If the interaction has a related incident, I don't want to see it. Now, your first instinct may be to go into service event relations, go into related incidents, find the incident ID, and say, oh, is null. You would think, as I said, your first instinct would be that this will give you what you want, but it will not. And I'll tell you why. The reason it won't is because there are other objects related to interactions, and because of the nature of that relationship, because you can have one or more incidents and one or more changes and one or more problems or whatever related to a single interaction, simply saying incident ID is null won't give you those that don't have a related incident, because what will happen is there'll be an instance of the interaction record where the related incident ID is null, but the related change ID is not null. And so if the interaction has a related incident and a related change, this query will get a hit on the instance that has the related change because the incident ID is null, and you're actually going to get interactions that do have related incidents. That's not what you want. So what you need to do is create what's called a subquery, or a combined query is what it likes to call them. So you can see this icon up here, and the same icon appears in Business Objects 3. And this allows me to create a combined query. So if I click this, now I get a little window here that says Combined Query 1 and Combined Query 2. And you can see that the results are the same for each, and that's required. You must have the same number of columns, and each column must have the same data type. They don't have to be the same. I could have priority in one and category in the other. But the data type has to be the same. So priority would have to be in the second position in the first one, and category has to be in the second position in the second one. And because priority and category are both text, it'll work fine. In this case, I'm not worried about that. I want the same columns in each one. What's going to be different here is what's in the the filters below. So what I want to do is I want to mimic, actually I want to drop this from the first one because, as I said, that won't give us what we want. Now in the second one, I'm going to repeat the predefined condition on close time. So close time in last X full months. And I'm going to add to that incident ID is not null. So the second query is going to identify every interaction that has a related incident. The first query is going to identify every interaction closed in the last full month. This one is going to be everything closed in the last full month that has a related incident. So now I can instruct Web Intelligence to subtract the results of the second query from the results of the first. So basically, any record in the second query that matches a record in the first query will not be shown in my results. And I can do that by changing this operator. So you can see it's union, and I double click, or I single click, and it changes to intersection, and then I click one more and it changes to minus. So now I'm going to get the results of the first query minus the results of the second, which means that any interaction that has a related incident will be omitted from this query, and now I will get a true list of all interactions closed last month with no related incident. That's all the material I have for this webinar. So if there are any questions, now is the time for those questions. Can you use an Excel sheet as a data source? That's Jim's question. The answer to that question is yes, if you use the Web Intelligence Rich client. So if you're working in the browser, no. If you have the Rich client installed, yes. There are some drawbacks to that, though. The biggest one is that if you create a report that uses an Excel sheet as a data source, then you are the only one who can run that report. So you can't put it on the Business Objects repository and expect other people to run it. Correct. The report cannot be scheduled. But it is possible if you're using the Web Intelligence Rich client, which you would have to install on your workstation, your PC. Thanks everyone for attending, and have a great day. Bye-bye.